When the HOA sent cops to a black woman's door for not belonging, they never imagined who'd walk out next. Bang, 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 police, open up. Alicia Carter froze mid-step, a mug of coffee trembling in her hands. The steam rose between her shaking fingers as she glanced toward the window. Red and blue lights flashed across her white curtains. For a moment, her heart stopped. She wasn't expecting anyone. She wasn't doing anything wrong. But in this neighborhood, Crestwood Heights, being black was often enough to be treated like a crime. "Open the door now," another voice shouted. Alicia's breath caught. "Oh my God, what is happening?" she whispered to herself. She set her coffee down and cracked the door slightly open, only to be met by the blinding beam of a flashlight and two officers standing on her porch, hands on their holsters. "Step outside, ma'am," one demanded. Her voice quivered. "Officers, can you tell me what this is about?" "We got a call from the HOA," the taller one interrupted. "They said someone broke into this property. Said a woman matching your description was trespassing." Alicia blinked in disbelief. "Trespassing? This is my home." But they weren't listening. One of them reached for his radio, the other tightened his stance. The neighbors across the street began to gather, phones out, recording. And there, standing with folded arms near her mailbox, was Margaret Donaldson, the HOA president, in her pastel sweater and perfect smile, watching it all unfold, like she'd been waiting for this moment. Alicia's voice trembled. "Margaret, you called the cops on me?" Margaret smirked. "We just wanted to make sure everything was legitimate, dear." Alicia's heart pounded. She knew exactly what that word meant. One officer barked, "Ma'am, I need to see some identification." But before Alicia could respond, a deep, commanding voice thundered from behind her. "That won't be necessary, officer." The tone was sharp, controlled, and instantly changed the air. The door opened wider. Marcus Carter, Alicia's husband, stepped out, 6 feet of calm authority. His uniform gleamed under the flashing lights, dark blue, polished boots, silver badge. His police cap sat perfectly on his head, the word sergeant stitched across his chest. The officers froze. The younger one's eyes widened. "Sir?" Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You're standing on a decorated officer's property," pointing at his wife. "Want to explain why?" Silence. You could hear a pin drop. Margaret's smirk faltered. Her phone slipped slightly in her hand. Marcus took a slow step forward, his presence towering. "I want the name of whoever filed that report, because I'll be making one of my own. For harassment." One officer cleared his throat. We didn't realize." No, Marcus cut him off. "You didn't check." Alicia stood beside him now, her fear turning into fire. The crowd of neighbors began whispering, realizing the woman they'd treated like an outsider was married to someone who protected their entire city. Margaret tried to speak, but her voice came out shaky. "We were just concerned." Marcus's eyes locked on hers. "Concerned about what? A black woman watering her flowers?" Her face drained of color. The officers awkwardly stepped back toward their cruisers. "Apologies, sir. We'll clear this up." Marcus gave a single nod, then took Alicia's hand. "You already made a scene," he said, loud enough for Margaret to hear. Now the whole street knows who the real threat was. As the police cars rolled away, Margaret's composure cracked. Because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Marcus Carter wasn't just any officer. He was internal affairs, and tomorrow morning he'd be walking into her HOA office. Not as a neighbor, but as an investigator. The next morning, Crestwood Heights looked as picture-perfect as ever. The trimmed lawns, pastel houses, and neighbors pretending yesterday's chaos never happened. But word had spread. Every doorbell camera caught the flashing lights, the shouting, the moment Marcus Carter stepped out in full uniform. Inside their kitchen, Alicia stirred her coffee, quieter than usual. Marcus adjusted his badge in the mirror, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to go," she said softly. "You could just let it go." Marcus shook his head. "That's what they expect, that we'll stay quiet, embarrassed. But they brought police to our door. That's not something I ignore." Alicia sighed. She knew that tone, calm but final. By 10 a.m., the HOA's monthly meeting began in the community hall. Usually it was a dull affair. Complaints about garbage bins, lawn colors, or mailbox heights. But today every chair was full. The air buzzed with curiosity and tension. Margaret Donaldson sat at the head of the table, hiding her unease behind fake politeness. Her pearl necklace trembled slightly as she adjusted it. "All right," she began, forcing a smile. "Let's move to new business." The doors opened. All heads turned. Marcus Carter walked in, still in his police uniform. His presence filled the room like a storm front. Every whisper died instantly. Margaret's jaw tightened. "Sergeant Carter," she said, trying to sound composed. "This is a private community meeting." "Good," Marcus replied, his tone calm but carrying authority. "Then it's the perfect place to discuss what happened on my property yesterday." The tension crackled. Margaret's eyes darted toward the board members. "If this is about the misunderstanding—" "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Marcus interrupted. "It was a lie. Someone filed a false police report claiming my wife was a trespasser in her own home. That's a felony." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few residents shifted uncomfortably. Margaret forced a brittle laugh. "Surely you're not suggesting anyone here would—" Marcus placed a printed report on the table. "The call came from this HOA's emergency line. Traced to your number, Mrs. Donaldson." Gasps echoed around the room. Margaret's hand flew to her chest. "That's absurd. I only called because I didn't recognize her." Alicia stood in the doorway now, dressed elegantly in a white blouse and pearl jewelry, radiating quiet strength. "You didn't recognize me," she said, her voice steady. "We've lived next door for 2 years, Margaret. You wave every morning, or at least you used to." Margaret's face flushed red. I thought, you thought a black woman couldn't live in a house like ours," Alicia finished sharply. The silence was suffocating. Even the board members looked away. Marcus leaned forward. "You could have come and spoken to my wife, but instead you called armed officers. Do you understand what could have happened if they hadn't recognized me?" Margaret's voice cracked. I didn't mean any harm." "But you did harm," Marcus said coldly. "You put her life in danger." The tension reached its breaking point. One of the younger board members, a nervous man named Tom, finally spoke up. "Margaret, he's right. We all saw the footage. You called the cops because you assumed she didn't belong." Margaret's facade crumbled. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I just wanted to protect the community." Alicia looked around the room. "Then start protecting everyone in it." With that, Marcus gathered the papers, gave a curt nod, and walked out with his wife by his side. The room stayed frozen long after they left. For the first time in Crestwood Heights history, the HOA president had been publicly humbled, and it wouldn't be the last time, because Marcus Carter had just begun digging. The next few days in Crestwood Heights felt uneasy. The perfect lawns were still perfect, the mailboxes still gleamed, but something in the air had changed. People walked faster, spoke softer, and avoided making eye contact when Marcus or Alicia passed by. Inside their home, Marcus sat at the dining table, papers spread out like a battlefield. He wasn't just a husband now. He was an investigator. And this time, the case was personal. Alicia walked in quietly with 2 cups of coffee. "You've been at it since sunrise," she said. "You're supposed to rest." Marcus looked up, eyes intense. "I found something." He slid a printed document toward her, a list of HOA complaints over the past year. Nearly every one of them had the same target, Alicia Carter. Alicia scanned them, disbelief turning to anger. Unauthorized garden decorations, noise violation for playing music, parking too close to curb. "Marcus, these are ridiculous." He nodded grimly, and every single complaint was filed by one person, Margaret Donaldson. Alicia's hand clenched. "She's been trying to push us out since the day we moved in." Marcus leaned back. "It's more than that. I checked city records. Margaret's husband works in property management, and this neighborhood's next phase of homes, scheduled for renovation and resale. She wants us gone so she can inflate property values." Alicia's eyes widened. "So all this, the harassment, the cops, it wasn't just racism, it was profit." Marcus gave a single nod. "Exactly. And now I'm going to make sure everyone knows." Later that afternoon, Marcus visited the precinct. His colleagues greeted him with respect, but curiosity too. News of the incident had already spread. "Sergeant Carter," one detective said, "heard about the HOA mess." "You good?" Marcus's tone was measured. "I'm good, but I'm opening an internal report. False police calls, misuse of community hotlines, and harassment based on racial profiling. I want it on record." The detective hesitated. That'll make waves, man. Those folks have money. Marcus's gaze didn't waver. Then they can afford accountability. Meanwhile, at the Crestwood Heights clubhouse, Margaret was unraveling. She sat surrounded by board members, her usual confidence replaced with panic. He's filing a formal complaint. If the city looks into this, they'll find everything. Tom, the youngest member, frowned. Maybe they should, Margaret. We can't keep covering this up. You've been targeting them since day one. Her eyes flared. Don't you dare turn on me. But it was too late. The others exchanged uneasy glances. Her reign of control was slipping. That evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, a small crowd gathered on the street again. Marcus returned home, calm but firm, while Alicia waited on the porch. He handed her a folder. It's official. The investigation's open. Internal Affairs and the City Housing Department are involved now. Her breath caught. Marcus, that could expose so many people. That's the point, he said quietly. People like Margaret hide behind rules, meetings, and paperwork. But when you shine light on them, they crumble. Alicia stepped closer, eyes soft. I just want to live in peace. He smiled faintly. And you will. But peace only lasts when truth wins first. As night fell, police cruisers once again rolled through Crestwood Heights, not for Alicia this time, but for records, statements, and subpoenas. Behind her curtain, Margaret watched them with trembling hands, realizing the roles had reversed. The very system she tried to use against a black woman was now knocking on her door. The next morning, the usually quiet Crestwood Heights was buzzing again. Police cars came and went from the HOA office, and neighbors whispered over hedges and fences. No one dared knock on the Carter's door, but everyone wanted to know what Marcus had found. Inside the Carter home, Alicia sat at her computer, scanning community emails while Marcus organized documents for the city investigator. The tension had shifted. This time, it was on their side. Marcus, Alicia said suddenly, eyes narrowing at her screen. You need to see this. He leaned over her shoulder. The HOA's email thread, which had accidentally copied her, included a recent attachment. It was labeled Crestwood Phase 2 Clearance List. When Marcus opened it, his expression hardened. It was a spreadsheet, names, addresses, and notes beside each one. And next to their address, in bold red letters, it read, Priority Removal, Pending Law Enforcement Coordination. Alicia's mouth fell open. They planned it, Marcus. They weren't reacting. They were setting us up. Marcus clenched his jaw. This isn't just harassment, this is conspiracy. He quickly copied the file and called the housing investigator he'd been working with. Detective Morales, he said firmly, I've got something you'll want to see. Looks like the HOA was coordinating illegal property removals under false pretenses. Within hours, 2 unmarked cars pulled up outside the HOA office. Margaret Donaldson was already there, pacing inside, her nerves visibly cracking. When the detectives walked in, she tried to mask her fear. Officers, this is outrageous. What is this about? Morales placed the document folder on the table. We're here about these files, Mrs. Donaldson. Would you like to explain why certain homeowners, all minorities, were marked for priority removal? Margaret stammered. I don't know what that is. I didn't write that. Morales raised an eyebrow. So someone used your login, your email account, and your signature? She froze. The other board members glanced at one another. Tom, the young member who'd stood up to her earlier, finally spoke. She told us to do it, said it was for community consistency. Margaret's face turned pale. That's a lie. Morales slid a printout across the desk, a photo from a security camera. It showed Margaret in the HOA office, late at night, typing at her computer with the very spreadsheet on the screen. Her voice cracked. I was just following advice from our consultant. Marcus's voice echoed from the doorway. You mean your husband, Richard Donaldson? The same one who manages the development company that profits when families are pushed out. Everyone turned. Marcus stood there in full uniform, arms crossed, calm but fierce. Margaret's hands trembled. You have no right to be here. I have every right, Marcus interrupted. You brought the law to my house. Now it's at yours. The silence was suffocating. The detectives exchanged glances, then began collecting statements. Margaret's mask was gone now, the confident HOA queen replaced by a frightened woman realizing her empire was built on lies. As she was escorted out for questioning, neighbors gathered outside, watching in stunned disbelief. The woman who once dictated the color of everyone's mailboxes was now being read her rights. Across the street, Alicia stood with her arms folded, her face unreadable. One of the older neighbors, Mrs. Green, who had always stayed silent, approached her quietly. "I just want you to know," she said softly, "we saw what they did to you, and we're sorry. We let it happen." Alicia nodded. "Apologies don't fix everything, but the truth, that's a start." Marcus joined her, his hand resting gently on her back as the officers drove away with Margaret in the back seat. Crestwood Heights would never be the same again, because the people who once hid behind rules had just been exposed by the very man they tried to humiliate. Crestwood Heights was no longer the pristine picture of calm suburbia. News trucks lined the streets, cameras clicked, reporters stood on sidewalks, narrating live segments about an HOA discrimination scandal under police investigation. The story had gone viral overnight. Clips of Marcus confronting the officers, captured by a neighbor's doorbell camera, had flooded social media. Alicia watering her flowers moments before the police arrived had become a symbol of injustice. A justice for Alicia trended nationwide. But with exposure came backlash. Inside the Carter home, Alicia scrolled through her phone, her face lit by the glow of countless notifications, support from strangers, messages from advocacy groups, and hate comments. "Marcus," she said softly, "they're calling me a liar. Some are saying we staged it." He looked up from his desk, where he was filling out final reports for internal affairs. "That's what happens when truth threatens power," he said firmly. "They twist it, but we have proof. The city has the files now. They can't spin this away." Still, Alicia felt uneasy. The same neighbors who smiled at her last week now crossed the street to avoid her, and the few who dared to speak did so in hushed tones. By evening, another HOA meeting was announced, an emergency session, but this time it wasn't led by Margaret. She was in custody. It was chaired by Tom, the young board member who'd exposed her. The hall was packed. Reporters lingered outside. When Alicia and Marcus walked in, conversations stopped instantly. The couple's presence carried both tension and respect. Tom cleared his throat. "We're here to discuss the future of Crestwood Heights following the criminal investigation involving Mrs. Donaldson, and to formally apologize to Sergeant and Mrs. Carter." Murmurs swept through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, others rolled their eyes. A man in the back stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We moved here for peace, not politics. Now the whole country's watching us like villains." Marcus turned to face him. "Peace built on silence isn't peace. It's denial," Alicia added, voice calm but cutting. "You called the cops on me for watering my flowers. That wasn't peace either." The man sat down slowly. Tom continued. "As of today, we're revising our HOA charter. No more anonymous complaints, no more targeting. Everyone, regardless of race, has equal standing in this community." The room was still. Then, from the back row, Mrs. Green spoke up, the elderly neighbor who'd apologized to Alicia the day before. "I've lived here 30 years, she said, "and I've never seen courage like what you two showed. Maybe it's time this neighborhood learns from that." Applause began slowly, then grew louder until nearly the entire room stood. For the first time, Alicia felt her eyes sting, not from fear, but from relief. Marcus took her hand. "Looks like change finally showed up," he whispered. But not everyone clapped. Outside, in a black SUV parked across the street, Richard Donaldson, Margaret's husband, watched the meeting from a distance. His face was cold, his jaw tight. He made a quiet call. "They think this is over," he said into the phone, "but if they take down my wife, they'll regret it." The line went dead. Inside the hall, Alicia smiled faintly at her husband, unaware that the fight was far from finished. Because the deeper Marcus's investigation went, the more corruption he was about to uncover, and the more dangerous it would become. The next morning, the Carters woke to the sound of murmuring outside their window. A crowd had gathered near the HOA office across the street. Curious, Alicia and Marcus stepped out together. What they saw made Alicia's jaw drop. Channel 7 news vans were parked along the curb, cameras pointed directly at the HOA president's house. Apparently, someone had leaked footage of the entire confrontation, the shouting, the officers' racist comments, and the chilling moment Marcus stepped out in full uniform. The video had gone viral overnight, On social media, hashtags like #OnlyJustice and #MajorCarter were trending. Thousands were furious, calling out the HOA's discrimination and demanding resignations. Inside the HOA office, Karen and 2 board members looked like ghosts. Karen's perfectly styled hair was a mess now, her voice trembling as she shouted into her phone, "I didn't know he was, I thought they were." Her sentence fell apart as the cameras turned toward her. Marcus and Alicia stood on their porch, holding hands, not saying a word. The silence between them wasn't anger, it was power. For once, they didn't have to defend themselves. The truth was doing the talking. Then, a black SUV pulled up beside the news crew. Out stepped a tall man in a blue suit, Colonel Dean Whitmore, Marcus's commanding officer. Reporters rushed toward him, but he waved them off and walked straight to Marcus. He saluted first. That small gesture, a superior officer saluting his soldier, rippled through the entire crowd. It was respect, recognition, and justice rolled into one. Karen's legs almost buckled when she realized what was happening. The very man she had accused of not belonging was now being honored by a senior officer right in front of her entire neighborhood. Colonel Whitmore turned toward the cameras. Major Marcus Carter has served this nation for over 15 years, leading missions that kept this country safe. He's a decorated officer, a family man, and a citizen who deserves more than prejudice. He deserves respect. The crowd erupted in applause. Even those who had been silent before now stood with their phones raised, recording every second. Karen tried to slink away, but one of the reporters stopped her. "Mrs. Davenport, would you like to apologize on camera?" Her face flushed crimson. For the first time, she couldn't find a word to say. She turned and fled back into her house. Marcus placed a gentle hand on Alicia's shoulder. "We don't have to fight every battle," he said quietly. "Sometimes the truth fights for us." Alicia smiled faintly. Maybe, but this time the truth needed a uniform. By afternoon, HOA headquarters issued an official statement suspending the entire board pending investigation. The officer who had drawn his gun was placed on administrative leave, and the neighbors who had mocked Alicia sent private apologies, some sincere, others out of fear. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Alicia stood at her garden fence. The same neighbor who had once sneered at her now hesitated before speaking. "Mrs. Carter," he said awkwardly, "we're lucky to have you both here." She nodded politely. "You are," she replied, her voice calm but commanding. Inside, Marcus hung up his uniform. "You ready to move on from this?" Alicia glanced out the window at the flashing lights still leaving the neighborhood. "Not move on," she said softly. "Move forward." The storm had passed, but the message it left behind would echo through the entire community. 2 days after the storm, peace had finally settled over the Carter household. The air smelled of coffee and calm, the kind Alicia had prayed for since that night. Marcus sat by the window, flipping through the morning paper. His face graced the front page beneath the headline, "Hero Major confronts HOA discrimination. Nation applauds his courage." He gave a small, amused chuckle. "Didn't think my face would end up in the news again unless it was for saving a base, not a driveway." Alicia smirked. "Seems saving our peace is just as heroic." Before he could reply, his phone buzzed. The caller ID flashed. "Governor's office." Marcus frowned. "That can't be right." He answered cautiously. "Major Carter speaking." A calm, authoritative female voice replied. "Major, this is Governor Elaine Brooks. I wanted to personally thank you for your composure and service. What happened in that neighborhood has sparked a statewide review of HOA authority and bias complaints. You've inspired change, sir." Alicia froze mid-step, listening. The governor continued, "And, Mrs. Carter," she paused, clearly aware Alicia was nearby, "the way you stood firm and documented everything. It's gone viral for a reason. You're an example of strength under fire. I'd like to formally invite both of you to the Governor's Gala next month to be recognized for your contribution to community justice." Marcus's usually steady voice softened. "Ma'am, that's an honor." When he hung up, Alicia's eyes were wide with disbelief. "Did she just—" "Yes," he said with a grin. "We're going to the governor's mansion." The news spread like wildfire. Neighbors who once avoided them now waved shyly as they drove past. Even Karen Davenport's house remained eerily silent. Her name had become a symbol of public disgrace. A week later, a white envelope arrived in their mailbox. No return address, just the words "I'm sorry." Inside was Karen's resignation letter from the HOA and a small note in her shaky handwriting. "I was wrong. I judged you because I was afraid. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." Alicia read it twice before quietly setting it down. "Growth," she murmured. "Maybe there's hope for everyone." That night, as they packed for the gala, Alicia found Marcus adjusting his medals in the mirror. "You know," she teased, "you could just wear one. You don't have to outshine the governor." He grinned, stepping closer. "It's not about the medals, baby. It's about what they remind me of, that standing for what's right doesn't need permission." As they left their home, the same street that once whispered behind their backs now glowed with porch lights turned on in quiet respect. Little kids saluted Marcus as he passed, and elderly neighbors waved from their rocking chairs. At the end of the cul-de-sac, Alicia looked back once more, at the house that had been their battlefield, their proof of endurance. She smiled. Marcus opened the car door for her. "Ready, Mrs. Carter?" She took his hand, eyes bright with pride. "Always, Major." The engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the night, two silhouettes driving toward a future they had earned the hard way. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from a badge or a board. It comes from courage, grace, and a love that refuses to back down.